the forum today, where we're going to be talking about the short breaks provision and education other than at school. Just a quick housekeeping. We will, as you can see on your screens, we will be recording this meeting. For those parents who are unable to attend, they have sent through some questions ahead of time, and also this will then get posted on our YouTube page. Sarah, if you've got if you wouldn't mind being able to bring the slides up, that would be great. So with that in mind, if we can make sure that everybody's muted throughout the session, so that we can sit. We'd like to see the presenters if that's okay, but if everybody else can make sure you stay on mute so that when the doorbell goes and your dogs are barking, it's not caught on the recording, that would be great. If you do also have any questions that you would like to ask during any of the presentations, if we could ask you to put them in the chat, and then we will pick up those questions at the end of the presentations and facilitate the session that way. That would be perfect. We are looking to try and finish about 11:30, but if there are ongoing questions that haven't been answered, if people are happy to stay on, then that would be perfect. We're happy to do that. Okay, Sarah, I think if you could just flick along a couple of slides. I think I've done the housekeeping. So just to give you a bit of a reminder, I'm going to go up first and give you a few introductions of who's doing what today, and also just to give you a very brief update about where we're at with regards to the Parent Carer Forum survey. So in terms of the agenda today, we have Angela Lewis and Bo White, who are going to be talking about the short breaks. And we have Karima and Mark, who are going to be talking about education other than at school and what that actually is, and what it isn't as well, which is equally as important. So as I say, please do put questions in the chat and we will pick that up at the end of the presentations. Okay, next slide, please. So just a quick reminder for those of you who are new to this, who are the Parent Carer Forum? Well, we are a group of parent carers who all have children with special educational needs and disabilities across the borough. We work in partnership with the professionals. So Angela Lewis, Mark, etc. sit on our steering group, and we work alongside them to ensure that some of the issues that we are facing are raised on a regular basis.
No, he wants to put in the Lego box, but shouldn't be up there anyway.
Please, can we just make sure that we're all on mute? That would be perfect. There are 156 parent carer forums across the whole of the UK, and they are all allocated alongside. Sorry, guys, I'm getting distracted. Let me just see whether or not Sarah could you just see if you could just make sure that everybody's on mute for me? That would be great. Yes, we're part of the National Parent Carer Forum, of which there are 156 of them across the whole of the UK. We'll be sending out this presentation to you at the end of the session so that you have an opportunity to click through some of these links. And there's some useful information with regards to Contact a Family. Contact a Family is an organisation who actually manages the money that we are given to by the Department for Education to actually ensure that parent carer voices are actually heard. Thank you. Okay, so if you could move on to the next slide, please, Sarah, that would be great. And the next one. So our survey, we conducted our survey. That this is a process so far. We launched it during the Christmas break and it closed just about the 7th of February. We extended it actually. And in terms of the process up until now, we consulted with parents with regards to any questions that they would like including. We also consulted with the professionals and some steering group members to see, we wanted to keep it as close as possible to our 2022 survey so that we could do a good analysis against specific areas of analysis. So, you know, whether or not we're reaching the same amount of people. But there was also some questions that came in that weren't involved or weren't included in our previous survey, which had come from professionals and from parents. Questions like around transport, questions around preparation for adulthood. So those have been included in the survey. We promoted the survey across all of our platforms, across social media, and we asked our professionals and our steering group to do the same. We then collected that raw data from the SurveyMonkey tool that we used, and we've asked professionals for their feedback in terms of how they would like the analysis to be presented. And all parent comments up until now have been put into an AI artificial intelligence program called ChatGPT, just to get some raw data and to get some common themes that are totally unbiased, because we're not analysing it. Artificial intelligence is analysing it, and we're going to take you through what that analysis has said through this presentation. So next slide, please. Flick through these as quickly as we can. So we had 369 people complete it. 62% of those who completed it were male, 38% were female, and 0.5% were other. And this gives you an idea of the split of the age groups. This is data that is literally just raw data from the SurveyMonkey application that we used. Next slide, please, Sarah. So again, it gives you an idea of the split of age groups there, and it gives you an idea of the numbers of people. So there were 17 to 19-year-olds who completed it. And that's the pretty similar to the 2022 survey that we did. So we're hitting the same group of people, and we're having that equal spread across the areas that we know that we represent. Okay, next slide, please. So how can we cut the data going forward? So this is how we can actually manipulate that information that comes through SurveyMonkey to make it a little bit more useful for you guys to understand, and for the professionals to take some of that data away and do that deep dive and see whether or not there's certain areas, pockets of perhaps postcodes that are experiencing things differently to others. So these next few slides gives you an example of how that can be done. Okay, so the annual review process. This gives you an idea whether or not, so the question around this was question 25. Can you give us examples of where the annual review process was positive? So this gives you the age split of those people who had completed it and who believed that the annual review process was positive, and also a further split whether or not those children were at specialist school, at mainstream school, were out of area and coming to a quack school. So it gives us really good information about who's experiencing what. So the action to the professionals who we work with is come back and tell us what data you want, and we will do this further analysis for you. And we've given them to the Easter break to come back with any kind of further analysis that they want. And then we'll go away over April and review all of that. Okay, next one, Sarah. So again, this is the annual review process was positive. So again, you've got that split that you can have via age group and whether or not you agree or strongly disagree. So it's doing that layering effect of all of that information that we've actually got out there. Okay, next one, please. So how can we cut the data even further? One, Sarah, next one. Sorry, that was an additional slide. I've already done that one. Sorry, guys. So these are the common themes that the artificial intelligence have generated. There's some challenges with communication and access. One of the most prominent themes is that the challenges faced by parents and caregivers in accessing support and services and communicating with relevant agencies and professionals. Delays, lack of responsiveness, difficulty in navigating the system are common issues highlighted in the feedback. Concerns about transition and future planning. Parents express significant anxiety and uncertainty about their children's transition to adulthood and the adequate support and opportunities that are available. There are concerns about education, employment, and independent living for children with special educational needs as they reach adulthood. And then issues with the EHCP process. So the EHCP process is a source of frustration for many parents, issues ranging from delays in assessment and approvals, in challenges in understanding the requirements and obtaining support. Communication and support from the SEM teams are cited as areas that need improvement. So again, these aren't our words. These are the hundreds and hundreds of responses that we've had that we've then stuck into the AI process, and actually this is what's come out with those common themes. So next one, Sarah. Positive experiences. Despite the challenges, there are instances of positive experiences in specific professional services and support networks. Parents value the support provided by schools and therapists and community organisations and parent carer forum. The desire for improvement involvement. There's a clear desire for improvement in various aspects of SEND services, including communication, accessibility, responsiveness, and the EHCP process. Many parents express an interest in becoming more involved in advocacy and support groups, support efforts. So the next stages of this are to, this is very bland. What we need to do now is really have those voices of those 369 parents represented in the words that we then put together. So the next stages of the process are, if you move on to the next slide, Sarah, that would be great. To do that further deep dive analysis, we will then prepare an overall report, which will include some common themes, but also make sure we include the quotes from parents. So it brings it to life more, and your views and your actual quotes will be clearly anonymized, but they will be in there so that you can see yourself reflected in the words that we've put into it. We will then send those findings to the SEND Strategy Group Board. They will have an opportunity to review it, and any specific gaps that have then been identified in the services will feed through to their perceived gaps report process. We will present the final report at the Parent Carer Forum, hopefully in May, but that's dependent on ensuring that we get to the SEND Strategy Board, etc. And then we'll publish the results, and we'll publish it via the routes that we published it in the first instance. So via websites, via social media platforms, and we'll make sure that we send it out to the key stakeholders too. So those key stakeholders are the third sector. So they kindly contributed to the consultation process. So the likes of Disability Positive, the likes of Space, Live, Down Syndrome Cheshire, they've all had an opportunity to contribute to this. So we will be sending the final report out to those guys as well, so that they are aware of the voices of our parent carers here in Cheshire West and Chester. Okay, has anybody got any questions on that at all? Did anything come up in the chat? Is there anything that people would like us to include? Any further kind of analysis that people, parent carers, would like to have represented in that? I'm taking the silence as good. I do appreciate that was a very quick whistle-stop tour, because I haven't got a massive amount until I've got the final data to share with you, the final version. It's just at this point in time, it is literally just a this is the process and these are the numbers, and we'll get all of that full report to you as soon as it's collated. Okay, no questions at this stage? That's fantastic. Well, if you do, then just put them in the chat and we'll pick it up as and when we go along. So now I'm going to hand over to is there a question? Sorry. If anybody wants to raise their hand, because I can't see your screen when we're sharing it, if you have got a question, then just raise your hand on the reactions button, press your reactions button, and I'll be able to see you, or put something in the chat. Okay, I'm taking the silence as golden, so I'm then going to introduce Angela Lewis and Bo White for me to go through the wraparound care. So over to you, Angela and Bo.
Morning. I'll probably start this, and then Bo has got a few slides towards the end. So good morning, everybody. My name is Angela Lewis. I'm a senior manager within Cheshire West and Chester, and have responsibility for strategic commissioning of children, families and public health services within the local authority. And just wanted to take some time today to provide you with an overview of the short break services, an update and next steps, and then Bo will be able to talk about the National Wraparound Childcare Programme towards the end. So next slide, please. So what are short breaks? This is the legal definition of them. So services that give children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities the chance to have time away from their families, make new friends and have fun, and give parents or carers a break from caring from their child. And short breaks include a range of daytime care in the home of disabled children or elsewhere, overnight care in the home of disabled children or elsewhere, educational or leisure activities for disabled children outside of their homes, and services available to assist carers in the evenings, at weekends and during school days. Thanks, next slide. So just to break down what we have on offer within Cheshire West and Chester, we've got community-based short breaks for children and people with targeted and complex special
Angela,
needs.
I'm just struggling to hear you. I don't know if anybody else is, but I'm just struggling to hear you. If you could fiddle with your mic for me for a little bit, that'd be great.
Bear with me. Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
As always, because it's Zoom, I'm on somebody else's tablet. Endorphins deliver the community-based short breaks, and they provide inclusive also provide inclusive children and youth group sessions where some children and young people can play, learn and build confidence. They take place in the communities, generally at the weekend on a Saturday. And then the second offer that we have within short breaks is a brokerage service, and it's called Community Connections, and it's provided by Disability Positive. And they provide information and guidance, practical support and funding. And then thirdly, and a little bit newer, is community outreach and community groups. So this is again provided by Endorphins, and it's specifically for children and young people whose needs have been assessed by the Children with Disabilities team, and a referral has been made to Endorphins to provide outreach in the community for a period of time, and then for that child to step into a group and be supported to make the transition into a group. Next slide. So I just thought I'd go through the Energise service, which is the community-based short breaks groups. So they started in the 1st of April 2022. They're delivered by the Endorphins group, and they provide inclusive groups for young children aged 4 to 11, and then older children aged 12 to 18. Sessions are across the various localities within Cheshire West and Chester, and they include Chester, Ellesmere Port, Neston, Northwich and Winsford. And there's a mix of mostly Saturday sessions, but some after school as well, in particular in the Ellesmere Port area. And there's details on this slide about how you can book on, either by telephone or by email. And it's a fairly simple process to book onto those groups, and more information about the sessions is available on the Endorphins website. So the story so far. So sessions have been well utilised across the local area. We've got a small waiting list at the moment in the Winsford area, and we're working with Endorphins to understand how we can deal with that. We've seen quite a significant increase in terms of how sessions have been used. So from the first quarter in 22-23, we were at 90 children attending, and we've increased to 152. In 23-24, and whilst the number not attending sessions since the introduction of the new booking system has decreased from 29 down to 16, so we did have some families who would book on but then not turn up. So Endorphins have worked to minimise that and the impact then, so that other families can actually book on for sessions. Part of the service is about transitions, and we've seen transitions from the younger sessions to the older sessions, as well as transitions of children and young people accessing universal services. So when self-esteem, confidence has grown, skills within activity groups has grown, some of those young people have been able to transition into more universal services. The Endorphins website was launched in October 2023, which saw the utilisation of the booking system. So from feedback from parents, the system was made a lot easier to access. And Endorphins started off with a red and yellow card, behaviour card policy, which was revisited and rolled out after the summer 2023, and the new policy was communicated out to families and is working well. And what I would say with Endorphins is that they do regular kind of ask regular questions of parents about how services are running, how well resources are being used, what sort of resources they'd like their children to access within groups, etc. Take those points on board and then continue to develop services. Next slide. And this slide just provides an example of some of the feedback that has been received through Endorphins from parents and also other staff working to refer children in. Next slide. The outcomes that have been achieved by Energise. So some of these outcomes were identified by parents when we consulted on the short breaks commissioning strategy about what parents wanted to achieve out of short breaks. So outcomes are demonstrated throughout the quarterly performance reporting, as well as case studies for individual children and young people. These are obviously anonymised. I just think it's worth saying at this point that we work with the Parent Carer Forum, who actively attend our performance reporting meetings, so that members of the Parent Carer Forum can bring in comments from parents about things that are working well, challenges, things that they would like to see changed, etc. So they are actively part of that process. And families report quarterly, they are more able to deal with their care and responsibilities and access support. So this area has remained high for the number of respondents for the regular surveys. And I think it's just worth saying, I think the sessions are 3 hours in length. So it gives parents a regular short break to go and do what they need to do, or just what are happening. Outcomes are also being achieved for children transitioning from the younger to the older sessions, as well as into universal sessions. And case studies clearly demonstrate the journey that children and young people have been on since starting the sessions in terms of the goals that they've achieved within those sessions. Thank you. So next is some background to the Community Connections service. So again, the contract for this service started on the 1st of April 2022, and Disability Positive provide this service. And it's broken down into 3 elements. So the first is information and guidance. So they support families to identify universal activity sessions within the community that their children can access. There's practical support as well. So there's initial support for children and young people via an inclusion worker to successfully participate in an activity group that they'd like to attend. So that could be the local Scouts or Brownie or a gym, etc. So support's provided by the inclusion worker to better understand the life of the child or young person. Once they've identified a group, then they will work with that organisation to ensure that the session is fully inclusive and provide support for that young person to attend the group. And finally, they have funding available, so up to £1,000 per annum per child through the short break individual payments, and that's available for any child or young person who is in receipt of disability living allowance middle or high rate, or personal independence payment standard or enhanced rate. And they can access up to £1,000 per annum, and through discussions with Disability Positive, the most appropriate short breaks are identified. The costs of those short breaks are then preloaded into a prepayment card, which is provided by Full Pay. And then the parent then has the flexibility to go services. Is there some feedback on the line, or is it just me? Thank you, that's better. So there on the slide is details of how you can access that service. And I think if you search on Community Connections and Disability Positive, it'll take to the link, which will provide you with more information. And it's really interesting when we get feedback from Disability Positive about the services that families do access, and some of the activities that the children access is just fantastic. The imagination that has been used in thinking about different ways that people can spend that money. But ultimately, the funding is there to provide the parent or carer with a short break. Next slide. As I said before, these are the services that are available. So information and guidance requests for this area are smaller than the funding element. So 33 requests during 22, 23 and 30 during Q3. Practical support, there is a short waiting list at the moment in place for access to the inclusion worker, and support is currently being provided to 3 families with a further 3 on the waiting list. So during 23-24, seen children and young people sustaining placements in universal services for 6 months, which is absolutely fantastic, and just makes accessing local community services more realistic for children when they've got that support, that they may not be able to sustain that placement if they didn't have the support in place. And also what Disability Positive do is provide training sessions to providers around the Equality Act and organisations, and making sure that they understand what making reasonable adjustments it could provide to accommodate children and young people to attend their provision. And funding, this has grown from 63 accessing in the Q1 of the start of this service to 396 families. And I think we had the quarterly review just recently, and we are at over 400 at the moment, which is absolutely fantastic. So Disability Positive working really hard to make sure it's as accessible as possible, and that's probably over 100 more than we had prior to 2022. So a lot more families accessing this, and I know that the Children with Disabilities team would always look at either the endorphin services or the community connections as potential support for families before they start to think about other types of services. Terms and conditions, they've recently been amended and will go live on the 1st of April 2024. And it's just to make sure that people are spending the funding on the cards appropriately, etc. They're the main changes. And Disability Positive provide an annual quality questionnaire, and it's recently been completed, with the majority of families returning the questionnaire confirming that they had a positive experience. Next slide. And here we've got some samples of feedback that have come through from the service, of the impact that the service and funding, etc., has had on some of the families. Thank you. And outcomes achieved. Outcomes are demonstrated through the quarterly performance reporting, and we meet with Disability Positive on a quarterly basis. And as said before, members of the Parent Carer Forum attend those meetings and feedback what families are telling them about the short breaks. Families feel they're receiving a short break by accessing the funding for activities, and families report quarterly they are more able to deal with their care and responsibilities and access support. So this area has remained at 100% throughout the contract, with the exception of 2 quarters. And the annual quality questionnaire completed by through Disability Positive confirmed that the majority of responses felt that outcomes are being met for children and young people for learning new skills, increased independence, increased friendship and increased confidence, which is fantastic. And then the Enrich service, which is the third and most recent service that we've added to short breaks, and it started on the 1st of November 2023, and it's known as Enrich. And it's been developed to support children and young people with complex SEND, where their needs, they may need up to, one-to-one support for up to 12 weeks. And then the opportunity to support these children and young people into group sessions, which Endorphins provide. So this really came out of within our market within Cheshire West and Chester. Very often referrals will come through our Children with Disabilities panel, and there will not be the availability within the market for services to work and support our children and young people, and very often there's a delay in that happening. So we felt we needed to do something to try something different. And what we've done is we have a contract with Endorphins to deliver the service. It is based on a service that they deliver elsewhere in the country, and they were able to demonstrate the impact that that has and the outcomes that were achieved. So referrals go through to the Enrich service via the Children with Disabilities Resource Allocation Panel. So it's not a service which can be directly accessed by families unless you are accessing support through the Children with Disabilities service. And what we're looking to do is ensure that there is sufficient group sessions available for children who, through accessing outreach work on a one-to-one basis within their own community, once they have developed increased confidence levels, self-esteem, etc., they are supported to access a group session within their local community. And that could be a group session which is delivered through an existing Endorphins, sorry, I've got low battery, Endorphins service, or a new group is established to provide support. Okay, next slide, please. So, as I said, it's been in place since the 1st of November. We've got 8 packages of support currently being delivered. We've got more referrals coming through the Children with Disabilities Resource Allocation Panel. And so the Enrich service continues to receive referrals, and we're just starting to obtain feedback and outcomes for the months where that service has been delivered. So early days at the moment. I mentioned before the short breaks commissioning strategy, and we're looking to carry out a revision of that commissioning strategy. So looking this summer to do some co-production to revise that strategy with parents, and then further develop a draft strategy which we would then consult with. So looking towards January 2025 to consult on that strategy. We take some time to analyse the outcome of that consultation, and then depending on what the feedback has come back from parents, we would then look to engage, what we call it, undertake market engagement. So we would talk to local service providers about what parents are telling us, and get feedback from them about the type of services that could be delivered to meet the needs of what parents are telling us that they need, and how that has worked in other local authorities, for example, some of the challenges that they may face in working in particular ways. And then we would draft a service specification and tender documents. Within the local authority, because of the level of spend that we're required through the short breaks budget, we would need cabinet approval to progress this to a tender, and we'd be looking to undertake that tender process, evaluation and award during summer 2026, with mobilisation in December. That could be slightly earlier with a start date of April 2027. So that's just an overview of the programme that we would need to go through to get the new short breaks services available from April 2027. And then an update on the wraparound short breaks programme that we've been working on. So we've been meeting, there's a working group been meeting for probably the past 18 months. There have been representatives from the Parent Carer Forum on the working group, and the aim of that working group is to deliver wraparound short breaks or wraparound childcare after school and during holidays to support working parents. So that working group has identified some challenges, which could include transport, so home to school transport, which could be a challenge for children to access services after school. We've worked with providers to design services. We have developed a service specification, and we've undertaken 2 tender exercises. So we've gone out to procure a service twice. After the first tender exercise, one provider was awarded a contract for the Ellesmere Port area, and you may or may not be aware of the fact we were looking to start that service in April, but unfortunately the provider has had to withdraw from the process, and that the withdrawal was really relating to the to issues that they were dealing with their wider organisation, not the delivery of services. So unfortunately they have withdrawn from the process. Next slide. So what we just wanted to assure parents is the fact that whilst we've been unable to secure wraparound short breaks or childcare through that process, what we wanted to do, and Bo White's going to go through some slides, is just provide assurances that we now have a national wraparound childcare programme which will support the expansion of wraparound childcare within schools and the local community. So I'll just hand over to Bo and she can go through the next slides.
Thank you, Angela. Hi, I'm Bo White. In terms of title, I'm the Early Years Commissioner, and my main responsibility is around the early years entitlements, so the 2, 3 and 4-year-old funding entitlements for our under 5s to access childcare provision, soon to be expanded as of April to our 2-year-olds, and then as of September, that expansion is rolling out for children from 9 months plus. So certainly a big time for changes to childcare following the announcements of the March spring budget. And this wraparound childcare programme is part of those announcements. So I just wanted to take the time today to go through some of the summary details of the programme with you, and what we're going to be doing over the course of that programme, including looking to address some of those ongoing challenges as part of that. Next slide, please. So in terms of the programme itself, as I say, it was part of the reforms announced in the spring budget of 2023, and I think the extensiveness of the childcare reforms were a surprise to everybody, certainly a welcome surprise. So there's a lot to going on in that. And in terms of the wraparound childcare programme, this programme is specifically for our primary school cohort, so children aged 5 to 11 primarily, but there will be other schools that are beyond those where age groups will be touched on, so schools that have lower provision and schools that have upper provision as well, which I'm sure will benefit from the programme. It is a very prescriptive programme. And we very much have to follow a strict timetable in terms of delivery and certainly submission of information to the Department for Education on a regular basis. And that process has already commenced in terms of gathering some of that information. So the ambition is that by September 2026, that all parents of primary school age children will be able to access term time childcare in their local area from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. To support parents to access work and training. And that is designed to provide that accessible, affordable, given that it is a parent paying provision in terms of childcare, rather than the entitlements for the early years. Wraparound childcare is very much parent-led. And they want it to be a school-centred wraparound childcare provision. And the funding for the programme is for the initial setup or expansion. So it's very much a pump priming model. And it's been described as a sort of build it and they will come sort of model to make sure that that provision is in place for parents to access and to give them the confidence and that provision will be there to enable to start work or change their working arrangements. So the expansion will come where there's either clear demand already, so where we've got demand in place, but there's either not quite enough places, or we know that it's likely that there could be some latent demand, so people not accessing it, and also where demand is not quite guaranteed, to sort of test that market to see whether or not there is demand there for it. So it's quite an innovative programme, and there certainly is appetite for us to try different types of approaches in terms of delivery model, as one size certainly won't fit all, to try and get this in place across all schools, so that they have access to provision. The government expectation is that the schools will have this on site where possible, unless there's a reasonable justification to do so, not to do so. So that's why I say sometimes we're going to have to look at some wider delivery models and support schools to be thinking in that way, and where they're absolutely adamant that there isn't a possibility of delivering it on site. But that hopefully should be few and far between. In terms of the programme aims, they would like it to be front-loaded and for a lot of the activity to take place during the 24-25 financial year. So that's certainly something that we're working towards as part of our delivery plan. And we're on track in terms of things that we've needed to submit so far to the department. And the hope is that the provision will be fully self-sustaining, so that parents will be paying for that in full from the end of the programme, which is as it finalises in September 26. So by the end of that summer, that academic summer. And there are, as I say, it's very prescriptive, and there's guidance for local authorities, and I've popped the link there for that one. And there's also guidance for schools as well, so that they fully understand their involvement in the programme and what they need to do to support the programme to get it off the ground. Next slide, please. So in terms of the delivery principles of the programme, it aligns with the Council's childcare sufficiency duty. So as in terms of our responsibility to ensure that there's that sufficient childcare in place as far as reasonably practical. To work with our schools and our school trusts, and also our private, voluntary and independent providers, as well as childminders and the early years sector as well, because a lot of those support the wraparound childcare in schools, to both set up new provision where it doesn't already exist, and also to expand provision where we believe that there's a need for additional places. The programme very much wants us to build on existing assets. So we have a really strong provider market out there that provide on school sites as well as on their own premises as well. So it's very much, whilst the aspiration is for that provision to be on the school site, but not to underestimate the fact that we do have a lot of provision out in the community and a great deal of skill and expertise and resource there too. So we need to build that into our local delivery plan to make sure that those providers remain sustainable. As part of the programme, all councils have to have a dedicated wraparound childcare lead. So everybody in the country is currently out recruiting for this wonderful person to take the lead on this particular programme. And we'll be interviewing towards the end of this month for our wraparound childcare lead. So we hope that they'll be part of our team very shortly. And their role will be to support schools to develop a sustainable delivery model. And as I say, to complement that existing provision where they're already utilising provision elsewhere or their own school provision. To help schools to actually better understand demand for and the supply of wraparound across their local area. So thinking about other neighbouring schools perhaps, and also other providers in the area as well, and also about that relationship and liaison with their parents to fully understand what their needs are around wraparound childcare provision. The role will also be very focused on developing those partnerships and bringing providers together and linking schools with providers in the market, so that there can be that holistic approach to provision and choice across the borough. And they will also be supporting and advising schools on the required standards around safeguarding and also registration with Ofsted, as this programme insists that our providers will be registered with Ofsted, both from a quality perspective and also to ensure that parents are able to benefit from utilising some of the financial incentives, such as the tax-free childcare accounts, where children with SEN can gain up to £4,000 per year in terms of government contributions towards childcare. So it's very, very much on the agenda to make sure that the providers are able to register for that, to enable parents to reduce the cost of their childcare. And then also to support them with that marketing and communication of that provision. And as I say, the national childcare initiatives as well, so that parents are aware of all the types of childcare support that's out there, and what they can access to try and reduce that outgoing in terms of spend on childcare. Next slide, please. And in terms of the school's responsibility, well, first and foremost, they've been tasked with working with us as a council and also others in the sector to identify how parents can be supported to access wraparound childcare provision. Whether the school has their own or a PVI provider already running their wraparound childcare, to make sure that there is some provision there, unless, as I say, there's a reasonable justification not to, and when we need to work through those challenges and with those settings to make sure that we've covered every possible opportunity. To work collaboratively with the council to ensure that parents at a minimum are signposted and fully aware of what wraparound provision is available outside in the wider community, and as I say, to promote that wider support in terms of subsidies, so the tax-free childcare initiative, as well as universal credit for those that are eligible, in order to help with that affordability. In terms of extending the hours of provision, we know that in the market there's a lot of schools that have a wide range of extracurricular activities, and whilst that wasn't included in the sort of the supply mapping exercise that we've been tasked with undertaking, we're very aware that there's a huge variety of activity happening there, and schools have been asked to look at this and see how that they can extend those and build on those to support their wraparound childcare offer as well. So to extend those closing at 4:30 or 5, so that there is a 6 p.m. offer where demand requires that. And also to extend their breakfast club and after school provision in a similar vein, where they're closing before 6 p.m. or they don't open before 8 a.m. So to extend what they already have in place. And also to expand on their partnerships that they already have in place with other organisations, so that there can be a dual approach where necessary to providing that 8 till 6 provision, or where they're finding it particularly difficult to expand, whether or not they don't have their own sufficient demand on site. There may be staffing issues where they can only cater for a certain proportion of children, or indeed just the size of the physical premises doesn't allow additional children due to the ratios and floor space required as part of their Ofsted requirements. To help them to offer support and to facilitate that easier access to off-site provision. So there is some support there to pump prime some of those transport challenges. So parents can, where necessary, access provision off-site, and to help schools be thinking about how that can be sustained in the longer term as part of that parent-led model. And to respond to the community's wraparound needs by adhering to that right to request guidance, which has been we've mentioned previously, which is often the first step to requesting and accessing this provision, to notify schools formally that there is a request from parents for this provision, and that guidance has been updated as part of this national programme with subsequent guidance to school as to how they should be responding to those requests as well. And also we will very much be reliant on the schools to support us to understand that parental demand in the market as well. We've certainly modelled it, and we've got a lot of information from our schools already around their existing wraparound provision, but it's I guess the demand that we don't know, which is part of the work to do, and where schools will be required to actively engage with their parents to understand that and to feed that back to us so we can support them to ensure that provision's in place. Next slide, please. So in terms of our local delivery of the programme, we've established a wraparound steering group, and that met for the first time this spring term. And in terms of that governance, that's very much feeding up through the local authorities, children's boards and the Children's Trust, linked to our steering group. Very much strong feed and close liaison with the working group, which Angela mentioned is already in place with our representatives of the Parent Carer Forum on that, to make sure that we really steer this programme to address our SEN cohort and their needs and those challenges. We've got to submit our supply and demand mapping at the end of this month, so that's currently going through governance in terms of the information that we've gathered so far. And in terms of our current position and scrutiny of that data, it's relatively positive as a borough as a whole. So we have a high proportion of primary schools across the borough that have access to wraparound provision. Approximately 85% of our primaries have got that on-site provision already, with a further up to 90+% who are accessing provision outside in the community. So we believe the vast majority of our schools are accessing or have access to some kind of wraparound provision, and whether that be on their own site or outside in the community. We still fully acknowledge that our main sufficiency gap is our provision in our special schools, and that is certainly something that we'll be looking at in great detail as part of this programme. Over half of the wraparound provision that's in place at the moment is compliant with that requirement for 8 AM to 6 PM provision. So there is some work to do there in terms of extending those hours. But again, some schools are feeding back to us that they've consulted quite extensively with parents, and there isn't demand for 6 PM provision, that actually they're happy with a 5:30 or 5:45 close. So that's certainly something that we want to support them to make sure that they're not just putting provision there that's not necessary. Almost a quarter of our pupils across the borough are already accessing some form of wraparound provision, and there tends to be an average daily attendance of around 10% cohort accessing provision at any one time. And we know that families don't tend to access provision Monday to Friday, so it tends to be a little bit of a pick and mix in terms of days and times of allocation. So on average, that 10% is a figure that we're looking to build into our model as a first stage to make sure that all schools will be able to have that 10% quota in place as part of this programme, and expand that where necessary. So in order to do this, and we've been allocated just over £1 million over the full lifetime of the programme, so that's over the 5 terms of 2 financial years. So we know that we are 24-25 allocation that we'll be working towards, and then there'll be further clarification of the 25-26 as we reach closer to that time. From our mapping exercises, we understand that approximately a third of our schools in the borough will require some support through the programme to create additional places, with more who may require support to expand existing provision to be compliant with that programme subject to demand. So in terms of our next steps, and obviously a lot of that will be carried out by our wraparound coordinator once they arrive in post as well. But we'll be doing further assessment of demand facilitated by the schools, and that will very much include our SEN cohort in terms of how many and how those children are already accessing that provision, certainly in mainstream where we know that is in existence, and then how we work with our special schools around that demand and what those requirements are. In terms of the consideration of those delivery models, as I say, it might be on-site provision, it might be off-site provision, it might be multiple providers coming together to provide a community cluster model. So all of those things need to be looked at in conjunction with those schools, those providers, and also our parents in terms of what they would like to see in terms of those delivery models and what's accessible and what those challenges might be in terms of transport, etc., and how we can also pump prime that as part of this programme as well, with a view that would be self-sustaining from 26 onwards. And then the main part of the programme will also be to allocate that programme funding, and the main route for that will be for that to go out in terms of grant funding, which we will invite providers, including our schools, to be bidding for over the course of this year.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bo. Please, I'm very conscious of time. That was really, really helpful. There's a couple of questions that I've got in my head before I have to go. So do you have a specific figure with regards to SEND children who are currently accessing wraparound care? Is that a broken out piece of data that we can get to see the comparisons?
I haven't got that figure to hand today. As I say, it is part of our mapping exercise that we're undertaking. We are going back to clarify those figures because whilst we're aware of the settings and providers that are inclusive and say they do have SEND children on site, we need to ratify those exact numbers. So we know there are children there, but we don't know the exact extent of those numbers. And we're also cross-checking that against the proportion of children with plans in place at those settings as well, so we know proportionally how many should be likely to access that provision.
Okay, great. And then as you quite rightly said, there has been a wraparound group who have been working to try and get wraparound care within the borough for a number of years, and this is obviously a massive step forward. So that we haven't met for a while, so I'm assuming that the next meeting will be going through looking at this process and how we can make sure that the demand of parent carers who have got children with SEND is reflected in all of this. We've gone through that request of information and everything else in the past. Do we need to redo that, or is so those are the kinds of next stages really, to make sure that we can bring this to life and we can actually start fundamentally getting those services in place.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be the focus of that wraparound care.
It will be, yes, and that's scheduled for April. Yeah. Brilliant.
Okay. With regards to other questions, Lucy, would you mind very much if we took your question with regards to the behaviour offline? Is that okay? That I can pick up with Angela out. I'm just conscious of time, and I know that we need to get onto the education other than at school presentation. So if you're happy that we can pick up the behaviour policy offline, then that would be great. Has anybody got any more
details of that and send it in, Jules?
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions of Bo or Angela on their presentations? If please do put them in the chat, and we will make sure that we get those and get any answers to those. Okay.